Tonight I feel a stirring in my heart that I can't contain.
Welcome to the Bible Talks About It. There are many parts to the body.
Yeah.
You know, I forget who said this, but they said something, you know, this person speaks all over the country. What if their thumb decided, you know, he speaks all the time, I want to do speak, you know, that wouldn't work out too well. You know, you have to stay within yourself. And the thing also is that getting offended, allowing yourself to get offended, will get you off track of that. That's the big problem. It's not like a little thing. Well, it's no big deal. I'm offended. They're sitting anyway. So I have a right to do that because of what they said to me. No, you don't, you know, because, and I like and it also affects how you forgive people if you allow yourself to get offended, because it makes it harder. And when you don't forgive, I don't want to use plagiarism. I think it was John Bevere said this. If you don't forgive, you forget what God forgave you of. And that's the problem, because people think, you know, well, you don't know what they did to me. Well, what did you do to God? And see, people try to put sin in different categories. Now, in the natural, yeah, maybe a little quote unquote white lie is not the same as murder.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell. It doesn't matter if you never cheated on your wife, if you never cursed, if you never, you know, but you just didn't do that. So that's the mentality we as in the body have to have. You know, we can't just, like you said, just hide our talent and just, I go to church, I pray, and all that. We have to be good stewards of what he called us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's just so powerful that God would inspire you to write a book about not getting offended again, because that is really the biggest thing happening right now in our country. Yeah. You know what I mean? And, exactly. You know, as I told you, I being from LA, I had a few different ministry positions, but I was most, let's say, blessed and effective in African-American churches, right? So I'm growing up in the San Fernando Valley of LA. The kids from Long Beach, Compton, Watts were bused up to Granada Hills, where I was living and going to school. Okay. So I was living with the kids where all the hip hop music from that time was coming from. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, and I mean, I was up there with them going to school. And so like you're talking about New York, you get pushed around a lot, right? That's kind of how it was for me. There's a certain edge I have to my personality and a certain confidence because of how I was nurtured. I had to survive by having the ability to, you know, put my chest out when it's necessary, right?
Exactly.
And so I grew up in a kind of a melting pot of so much culture, where the majority of my peers would be Hispanic, and then the second majority would be African American. Then there would be a few of us white people, and then there would be other, like there'd be Koreans. I had a lot of Korean and Filipino peers, maybe an Indian, and then some Native Americans, right?
Samoans?
In high school, yeah, there's definitely some Samoans. And so I'm just used to being that white guy in a crowd of all these people, right? So now I'm in this African-American mega church in Inglewood, and they love me to death, right? I'm like the preacher there that they love, right? I was just, you know, volunteer minister helping lead the young adult ministry, but I felt most alive in that situation. I'll say it that way, right? Okay. And so when I see all the offense happening right now, because what's happening is there's this very clear divide trying to bring racial disharmony. And I'm seeing it, again, these are the people from the church. I'm still friends with so many of them on Facebook, but the things they're saying and believing politically are on the opposite of what I'm saying and believing. And these are people I know personally, who I know love Jesus, who, you know what I mean? But because of these things that have been sown for so long, the offense is so strong, where it's almost like on both sides, we can't hear the other side to say, okay, that makes sense that you could feel that way. I never, you know, I was hanging out with you the whole time, and this never came up. We just enjoyed each other and assumed life was great for both sides, right? Right. So, I mean, do you have any insight on that in your own story?
Well, excuse me. Yeah, because I grew up with a lot of different, because in fact, I went to a school that was a high school that was predominantly white, but it was like maybe 70-30. Okay. Like, so, but I played baseball. We had a very good baseball team, and I think my junior year, I was the only black on the team, and my senior year, I was one of three.
Okay.
And I have that type of, and then when I went to college, most of the time, except for my last year or two, my roommates were white. And so I always had, I was able to relate to them, you know, in fact, and me and my roommates always had we had all these stupid arguments about, you know, whose music was better and whose women was prettier and whose hair was harder. I mean, just not, you know, as teenagers or early 20-year-olds. So I can relate. And now that's all before I was saved, mind you. Okay, so I've had black roommates as well. So I kind of get that, get the kind of paradigm. And I also lived in LA, like you said, like I lived in, can I share a funny story real quick? And it has to do with LA. Now I try to use sometimes humor to diffuse a situation.
Yeah.
Now this was a true story because it happened maybe in the late 90s. This would happen about 2 or 3 times where I'd be in a debate with a white person or maybe something along racial lines. And if it wasn't going the way they liked, out of nowhere, they would bring out, oh yeah, well, was OJ guilty or innocent? They just throw that at me, you know, like that had anything to do with the conversation. Yeah. And my response is always the same. It says, I don't know. And I'm not saying that to be some kind of smart aleck, because if you recall, that trial every day was on. You can see every minute of it if you want. I watched none of it. Occasionally, I might at home, after I get home from work, I might watch a little bit on the news, but I had none. So that's why I say that, because I didn't have enough knowledge. I didn't watch it to make an intelligent decision.
Okay. And
then I would change it. I say, you know, my only whole interest in the OJ situation was, I remember in 1994, remember the night of the Bronco chase?
Yeah.
I was working late and I'm driving home. Now I'm back in New York and I'm working for the phone company. That week I was working late shift. I'm driving home because this was, I think it was 6:30 in the Pacific time. It was 9 something out here in the East Coast. But anyway, driving home. Actually, I'm driving to my father's house, and I'm listening to this Bronco chase on the radio, and he's on this freeway. And every time they mention, because I lived out there for 3.5 years, I know where he is. I know where he's here, and I know where he's there. So I get into my father's house, and he's watching the basketball. The playoffs are on. I said, Dad, turn the channel quick. And I said, look at the Bronco chase. What? And he's on the 91 freeway now. I said, you see where he is? I used to live right there. This is my old apartment right there, right there. You know, and it's a true story. And it always lightens the mood. I mean, but I did pass by my old apartment. Yeah. You know, like that means anything. But,
that's funny.
So that's I've always been able to turn things around like that. You know, yeah. So and I don't allow the racial divide. Now that I find the racial divide is like is a lot of time between people who are maybe of the same color. You know, and it's a type of thing where, and I get what you're saying, because some people, the older people, they remember some of the hurts from the past.
Yeah. That
they don't realize it's not that way anymore. You know, granted, I'm not saying racism is over, but it's nowhere near like it was, because I'll be quite honest, because I hear statements like racism is as bad as it ever was. I'm like, really? I'm 61 and I've never had to, if I'm walking down the street and a white woman's coming, I've never had to get off the sidewalk and let her pass by, you know?
That'd be really weird to see that even.
Yeah. Right? I don't look for the colored men's room. You know, when I go to the movies, I don't go up the balcony where the colored people sit, you know? I mean, and you can live pretty much anywhere you want if you have the money for it. You know, there might be a few spots that's still there. And another thing I've just written an article recently about that racism is not the problem. It's a symptom. It's a spirit of division. It's the problem. But a lot of times, what is the point I'm thinking? It's not the person. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and rulers of darkness. You know, it's the spirit behind that person that's motivated them, and that's why we have to walk in love. You know, and you can see some people. You can see like I don't know if you recall that situation. Was it last year? I'm not exactly sure, but with a white police officer went into the wrong apartment and shot that guy, and then when she was being sentenced, the family, the black family of they said they loved her, And then they forgave and they hugged her and everything. And it's of course the mainstream media didn't play that too much, but I mean, it's something, but you can only do that if you're not offended, you're not walking in the flesh, that type of thing. So,
yeah, wow, that's deep. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really how you have to do it. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's basically what you have to do.
Yeah, that is so interesting because there's just so many layers to that. And again, like my experiences growing up in LA, the suburbs of LA at that,
Right.
my family, we were lower, like the bottom rung of middle class. And anyway, again, I come from that melting pot, but my background where I was part of an education system that we watched Roots, we watched Malcolm X, Gandhi, and all that kind of stuff. So that has shaped a lot, right? So when I'm watching, Kunta Kinte sticking it to the man and saying, my name's Kunta Kinte, right? And then, you see the generations. That's one of my favorite things. I love like Alex Haley's writings that became actual movies or the serial TV shows. Because it's a story of family and overcoming oppression,
right?
To where there's a success and things like that, right?
Exactly.
And so I, as a white person, look at that coming from a place where I never felt white. I never was really accepted by white people, but I had to learn to compete amongst my peers who didn't look like me to be respected by them. And now I can walk with that lens, right? That's a very different experience than my friend in the deep south part of South Carolina, right?
Right.
Where, you still got the cotton fields and the swamps and all that kind of stuff. And so when I hear their perception on certain things that might have been said, it's like, I'm thinking, how did you come to that conclusion? That's a whole different paradigm than I could even imagine anybody thinking. But we're on two different sides of the country, two different sets of values. You know what I mean? LA was established, or at least the California and all that was established. California was 1849, right? The 49ers. So
about that.
But the LA metropolis, I believe, is like 1920s and 1930s when it really started to take off. And that was long after the Civil War.
Correct.
So much different history there than someone from the deep south, right?
Yeah. But the thing about that, though, even still, the Bible says, forget those things which are behind. And press towards the mark of the high prize of calling Christ Jesus. You can't. It's not that we want to completely forget the past, but you can't live in the past. Because I heard somebody's talking about this talk about defunding the police and that cops were originally slave catchers. Well, yeah, okay. There's a lot of things that started out wrong, but we don't use it that way anymore. So why are you bringing that up? Yeah. It's irrelevant now, and especially. I mean,
you can say that. I could never say that and get away with it, but yeah,
exactly. I know I could say, and even still, I may be called, Uncle Tom and different things like that. But when you get to a place where you don't care about that, then that's why you don't get offended. You're not concerned. You're only concerned about speaking the truth. Yeah. Now, the Bible does say to speak the truth in love, because I've heard some conservatives say some things. While maybe what they said was true, the way they said it was not loving at all.
Yeah.
And absolutely. That pushes people away. So you have to get it right. That's why Jesus was tough where he had to be tough. He was tender where he had to be tender. So he spoke differently to the Pharisees than he did to maybe like to the woman at the well and things of that nature. So that's why it's important to be led by the Spirit of God. Yeah. You know who your audience is, what you need to say, and how you have to say it, because it's completely different paradigm how you say it to different people and what you say. Not like you want to hold back as such, but when to say certain things. A perfect example. We know God's main intention is for us as in the body is to, and not just for us, every year of the church, is to go out and preach the gospel. But we do see evidence in the book of Acts. There were times that some of the apostles wanted to go to a certain region, and the Bible says they wouldn't allow them to go there. Now, some places it tells them the reason why, because he had somewhere else to go, but others it doesn't. But the point is, he knows where to be most effective. He knows what his will is and why he wants you to go there. Yeah. And so we have to have the same tact. Can't just blurt out something because we think it's true, and it might be maybe because we heard it a certain way and it it helped us, that other person, it might not help them. So that's the main thing. I remember I had a partner with the phone company, and we're about the same age. I think I was like 2 or 3 years older than him, but our backgrounds are slightly. He was black, and he grew up in Brooklyn, and eventually we worked together for a while. And I ended up leading him to the Lord, and he actually also got filled with the Holy Spirit. But I know there's certain people he could talk to that I wouldn't, because they would see me almost as Uncle Tom, whereas he could deal with them more effectively. Whereas I could probably bridge the gap with some white people because I've lived among them and that type of thing. And I know their language, that type of thing. Yeah. Also, the fact that your background, I remember one partner I led to the Lord, when we started working together, he was living with his baby's mama, that type of thing. It was, and we used to go out, and do repair work. Sometimes he would just disappear, and he'd be with these different women and things like that. But he said he used to go to clubs. Well, when I was working, he was still going to the clubs and doing a lot of stuff. And when we had time and I had time to share, I could relate to that because I used to go to the clubs and all that. So in essence, I spoke the language, and I could tell him different things. I remember one time I was sharing with him about, and he asked me, what do I do for fun? I said, well, I go to some Christian parties, and some friends in my church, we fellowship and things of that nature. And now he liked me. He didn't want to offend me, but he was saying, he was kind of hem and haw, and he was like, when you go to these Christian parties, what kind of, what do you, when you play, what do you live? You mean what kind of music I listen to? Yes. He was so afraid to ask that. And I think at the time the whinings were big. I just told him we listen to Christian. I don't know what you can. He goes, listen, church music. I don't know what you consider church music, but we don't listen to Rock of Ages or stuff like that. Okay. So, I just share there is Christian gospel that I can relate to. That's enjoyable and everything, but it edifies me. So I just share that with him. But see, God will put you in a place where you can share and they can receive it. And that's why you don't have to go break the doors down and just say, you better get saved or you're going to hell.
Yeah.
That rarely works. So
yeah. No, that's powerful stuff. And it's interesting. It's because you're aware through your experience that God has created an audience for you. There's kind of that landscape where you do well in that landscape, right? It's like if someone has installation questions about how to set up phone and
exactly.
Fiber optics, guess what? You're the expert when it comes to these types of spiritual questions, how to relate to these people of race, socioeconomic backgrounds, and all that. You know what to do. Like you can think on your feet and make it happen.
Right. Exactly.
And again, going back to the whole point of your book and everything, being not offended, because, I was watching Sid Roth had Alveda King, Martin Luther King's niece, on just a couple days ago. And she was asking Sid Roth a question at the end. She was like, because Sid Roth is 80, I think she's in her mid to late 60s, and maybe a little bit older than that. And she was saying, I have a question for you, Sid, because you're Jewish in your background, you hear from the Lord, you've been doing this longer than I have, and and she was asking, why would God allow this stuff to happen? But she kept pausing and like repenting to God that God's going to be offended, because she comes from this idea that to question anything from God is just like, it's almost like a step down from blasphemy, right? I personally don't feel that way, right? I have zero conviction. I'm like, God is very secure in his personality.
I have a response for that.
Okay, and there's times I'm like shaking my fist, God, why this, that, you told me this, and this. And then I take comfort in the fact he lets me get it off my chest. And then,
you have a relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, as I've gotten older and matured and stuff, it's not as extreme. You know what I mean? I'm not stressing myself out like I did many years ago, but I don't feel like I'm offending God by questioning why, right? What is your thoughts on that?
Because first of all, what usually follows a question?
An answer.
Exactly. Well, a lot of times if you question God, he'll give you an answer. You may not like it, but he'll give you the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're sincere, if you're just playing a religion, then you may not hear anything.
Yeah.
But no, you can question God. Now, when I say question God, now like I put it one way, you could ask, like, let's say, hypothetically, for the virgin birth, someone's just asking, where were you born of a virgin? How were you born of a virgin? How long did it take for you conception? Those type of questions are fine. But to ask questions like, were you really born of a virgin? See, the word says that, and that's I don't know if it's blasphemy, but then that's not a faith kind of answer, and that's not the type of thing you need to be asking God. That where He already states what His word already states what the answer is. But certain things like why do things? Now also again, there might be things you might be a baby Christian, and you don't know what the word says about it. Just keep reading. And I remember the night I got saved. I asked. It was a ball player named Harold Perkins. He was playing in Mexico, and he had a apartment in Yuma, Arizona. I call Yuma, Arizona, my road to Damascus. Okay. And he was sharing with me, and I use this is like 1985, so I still use this today. If you have a question, you're reading the Bible. It's okay, God, you just said that, what does this mean to me? What are you saying to me? And he says, and he told me that sometimes I just read the next verse will explain it. Other times maybe I'll read a little bit longer. Sometimes it may take a week or two, but I will get the answer. But you don't be afraid to ask God, because He wants to engage with you. He wants to have conversation with you, because that's what relationships do. Yeah. He's not our taskmaster. We're not his. I know the certain parts may say we're slave, but we're not His slaves. We're His children. Yeah. So you can come to Father and say, okay, God, I have, why is this happening? That type of thing. And He'll direct you to the word. His Spirit will never disagree with the word. Mm-hmm. So He'll give you answers. Why is all this thing happening? Now it's funny we mentioned this racial unrest.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you're familiar with the prophecy that Kenneth Hagin gave in 1963.
Tonight I feel a stirring in my heart that I can't contain.